It began on a quiet Sunday morning, the kind that usually smelled of coffee, soap, and blooming roses. For 72-year-old Eleanor, Sundays were for silence. The slow creak of the porch swing, the faint hum of a radio from a neighbor's yard, the memory of her husband's laughter carried on the breeze. The maple outside whispered against the siding, and for a brief moment, the world felt steady. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud, but it carried weight, the sort of sound that pulls the warmth out of a room. When Eleanor opened the door, her daughter-in-law stood there, face smooth and cold, eyes unreadable. The words that followed were sharp enough to split glass. Within minutes, Eleanor's peace, her home, her safety, her dignity, began to unravel. What none of them yet knew was that, across town, 15 motorcycle engines would soon awaken. And when those riders came, nothing about this little street would ever be the same. Eleanor's cottage sat at the edge of town, a modest house built on 40 years of shared effort. Her husband, Walter, had planted that maple when they first moved in, saying its roots would hold the soil as tightly as they held each other. After his passing, the tree grew taller, its shade wide and protective, like the life they'd built. Her son had moved away years earlier, chasing opportunity and leaving behind the rhythm of home. When he returned with a new wife, Marissa, Eleanor welcomed her with open arms. Marissa was polished, confident, and endlessly charming. Too charming, Eleanor sometimes thought, though she brushed the feeling aside. She wanted to believe her family was expanding, not slipping away. But time has a way of revealing what smiles try to hide. Little things began to vanish. Bank statements, spare keys, receipts. Her son grew quieter on the phone, distracted. Then one day he was gone again, leaving Marissa to check in on the elderly woman he claimed was getting forgetful. Those visits started as courtesy calls but quickly turned into inspections. Marissa would walk through each room like an appraiser, running her fingers across the mantel, pausing at framed photographs. She'd make comments about upkeep, about responsibility, about how hard it must be to manage a property alone. Every remark was wrapped in sugar, yet each one left a bruise. The only place Eleanor could still breathe was the Highway Cafe 2 miles down the road. It was a haven for travelers, long-haul truckers, and a tight-knit motorcycle group known locally as the Guardians. They weren't the sort of men and women who sought trouble. They raised money for charities, helped stranded motorists, and always had time for coffee and conversation. They called her Miss Ellie, a name that felt like sunshine after a long rain. She never expected they'd become her safety net. The first real crack appeared one Tuesday evening when her lights went out. Thinking it was an outage, she called the utility company, only to be told her account was no longer active. Someone else had taken ownership of the property. Confused, she drove to the county office the next morning. There, under the harsh glow of fluorescent lights, she saw the impossible. Her house deed, signed over to another name, Marissa's, and below it, her own forged signature. Eleanor's stomach turned to stone. The betrayal cut deeper than any argument ever could. When she returned home, Marissa was already there, boxes stacked neatly, as if preparing for a move. Her tone was sickly sweet. "You can stay in the guest room until we figure this out," she said. It wasn't an offer, it was a warning. Days blurred. Mail disappeared before it reached her. Neighbors stopped waving. Her son's number rang to voicemail, then silence. It was as though her existence had been quietly erased. The breaking point came at the cafe. Sitting at her usual booth, her hands trembling around a cup of coffee gone cold, she finally told the Guardians everything. The leader, Dean, listened without interruption. A veteran with a calm voice and a gaze that saw through fear, he simply said, "Miss Ellie, you don't deserve this." The others nodded. They didn't promise revenge. They promised action. Within hours, they were digging through county records, checking legal filings, and talking to a lawyer who often rode with them. It didn't take long to uncover the truth: faked signatures, altered notarizations, a chain of deceit that could topple any pretense of innocence. Dean made a few calls, quietly ensuring that when the time came, the right people would be watching. When Marissa found out Eleanor had been asking questions, she arrived at the cottage in a fury. Her composure cracked. Her voice rose like a siren. She accused Eleanor of meddling, of losing her mind, of trying to ruin what was already settled. Papers flew. The air thickened. But for the first time in months, Eleanor didn't shrink. She stood firm, her voice steady though her knees trembled. "This is still my home," she said. That simple sentence redrew the battlefield. Miles away, Dean received a call from the cafe waitress who'd been keeping an eye out. Without hesitation, he signaled his crew. Engines ignited, a deep metallic chorus echoing across the valley. The roar reached Eleanor's street before the riders did. Neighbors peeked through curtains as the convoy approached, sunlight flashing off chrome. The motorcycles rolled to a synchronized stop in her driveway, 15 strong, their presence commanding and strangely peaceful. The patches on their jackets read "The Guardians," a name that at that moment couldn't have been more fitting. Dean dismounted, removed his helmet, and offered Eleanor a reassuring nod. "Afternoon, ma'am." "Heard someone was giving you a hard time," he said evenly. Marissa, caught off guard, tried to bluster, claiming it was a misunderstanding. But Dean's second-in-command stepped forward with a folder thick with evidence, copies of forged documents, witness statements, and contact information for the police already on their way. Marissa's voice faltered, her excuses dissolving into silence as sirens began to wail in the distance. Within minutes, the scene filled with flashing lights and uniformed officers. The fraudulent transfer collapsed under scrutiny, the truth laid bare. As Marissa was escorted away, Eleanor stood on her porch, surrounded by the low hum of motorcycles and the quiet strength of people who had chosen to stand with her. The maple tree swayed gently above them, leaves catching sunlight like applause. For the first time in a long while, Eleanor felt tall again. Weeks passed. The legal tangle unraveled in court, restoring the deed and clearing her name. The cottage returned to its rhythm, morning coffee, afternoon sunlight, and the comforting creak of the porch swing. Sometimes the riders stopped by to fix a fence or share a meal. Their laughter filled the yard, blending with the rustle of the maple leaves. Eleanor realized that what she'd regained wasn't just property, it was belonging. These strangers had become family, bound not by blood, but by choice. They reminded her that compassion doesn't always arrive quietly. Sometimes it comes thundering down the road, wearing leather and carrying justice in its wake. Her story spread through town like wind through branches. People started checking in on their elderly neighbors again. Families repaired old wounds. The tale of Miss Ellie and the Guardians became a local legend about decency, courage, and the kind of loyalty that can't be bought. On crisp autumn mornings, Eleanor would sit beneath the maple, coffee in hand, the rising sun painting gold across her porch. When someone asked how she'd endured it all, she would smile and say, "Kindness isn't always gentle. Sometimes it comes with an engine." The maple's roots ran deep, just like her resilience. What Marissa tried to steal had never been just a house. It was a life built on love and memory. And as the leaves drifted down, Eleanor whispered to herself, "They thought I was alone. They were wrong." If someone tried to take everything you built, would you stand in silence or find the courage to fight for the life you deserve?